It's KJZZ's Here and Now. I'm Steve Goldstein. In recent years, a number of local and national media outlets have covered the trials of Jodi Arias extensively. Arias was convicted of murder in 2013. More than 8 decades before that came the story of Winnie Ruth Judd, also known as the trunk murderess. A number of writers have looked into accusations against Judd and what crimes she confessed to, and the conventional wisdom went that self-defense was at least somewhat involved in the killings. But the cover story in this week's Phoenix New Times, on newsstands tomorrow, says there's a lot more the public hasn't been told. Robrt Pela wrote that story and joins me now. Robert, remind us of some of Winnie Ruth Judd's background.
In October of 1931, she killed her 2 best friends in a little house on North 2nd Street. And then, the story goes, with help from someone, she stuffed one of the bodies into a trunk and then cut up the other body and placed it in other pieces of luggage, and then got on the night train to Los Angeles, where she hid out for a week. She was given a life sentence, but she was sent instead to live at the state mental hospital, where she lived for that was 1933, and she escaped the last time in 1962. So she lived at the state mental hospital for almost 30 years, and she escaped 7 times while she lived there.
What is the continuing fascination with someone who committed murders in 1931?
The story remains interesting, I think, because it has a little bit of everything. It has murder and infidelity, social disease, drug addiction, beautiful young women, and what was in 1931 considered sex perversion. But what really keeps it in our interest, and what made the story interesting or different, is the fact that Winnie Ruth Judd packed her 2 dead girlfriends into luggage and took them on a train to Los Angeles.
Your cover story in the New Times, there's a confession letter. Was this not known about?
It was not, and much to my surprise, it was not known about by any of the Winnie Ruth Judd experts. There's an infamous document in this case known as the Drainpipe Letter. So anyone who knows the story well enough knows that when she was hiding out in Los Angeles, she wrote a confession letter, tore it up, and flushed it down the toilet in the Broadway department store. I decided about 5 years ago that I needed to see it in person. I had read transcripts of it, I had seen photographs of it, but I knew that it was at the state archives in Tucson. So I went to look, I thought, at the Drainpipe Letter, and what I discovered was this very different letter that told a very different story. It did not tell the story that Winnie ended up sticking to, which was a story of self-defense. It told a story that very much matched what she was convicted of. So I came back to Phoenix and I started calling all of the historians who have followed this case, saying to each of them, hey, what's up with this letter, and what do you think it means, and what do you suppose will be done with it? And every one of them, to a person, said to me, what letter are you talking about? So then I sat back for 4 years waiting for someone to publish the letter or write about the letter or talk about its provenance to the case, and it never happened. So finally I just wrote the story myself.
Okay, so these experts you spoke with, historians, you spoke with one of her later defense attorneys as well. Where did this letter go, and why would she have decided to come up with some other idea? I mean, obviously she lived a heck of a lot longer, but other than that, what was the point? Winnie
Ruth Judd had a succession of lawyers, and the last of them in 1933 was H.G. Richardson, who was a Pinal County attorney. She hired him after her criminal trial. She was kept from taking the stand by her attorney, Paul Schenck, and Schenck, in Winnie's defense, did not use the self-defense argument on her behalf during that trial. So she hired Richardson to say to the Superior Court, we're appealing this because she wasn't allowed to defend herself properly, and her attorneys failed to. And then, in an affidavit attached to that appeal to the Superior Court, he explains, quoting Ruth, what took place, which was that Sammy Samuelson, one of the two women, came at her with a gun, and she defended herself against the two women and ended up shooting both of them in self-defense. So he files this letter, this appeal and this affidavit on March 30th, 1933. And the next day he says to her, okay, so now what I need for you to do in your prison cell in Florence is I need for you to sit down and write to me in confidence what actually took place so that I can then build a defense for you, assuming that we get this appeal. And she sits down, again, the day after, 1 week after she has told her new attorney, I killed in self-defense. She sits down on April 6th and starts a letter in which she says, I was really upset because Anne Leroy was sleeping with my boyfriend and mocking me about it. And so I went over there and I killed her on Saturday morning. And then I killed Sammy because she was trying to get the gun away from me. And Richardson looks at, as far as I can tell, her attorney, Richardson, looks at this and says, I can't use this. She just told me last week that she killed in self-defense. I went to Superior Court and argued on her behalf. Mm-hmm. And so what he did was he took that letter on April 9th, the day after she finished writing it. She wrote it on two different occasions, April 6th and April 8th. He took the letter and he locked it in a safety deposit box. And then he died in 1944. And he apparently gave instructions to his wife, Fern Richardson. Don't show this letter to anyone, please. After I'm gone, just hang on to it. And let's make sure that it doesn't get out until after Winnie Ruth Judd is long gone.
Was there any indication that Winnie Ruth Judd was nervous there was something that she was hiding that people would find?
Yes. Donated along with this new confession letter was a stack of letters that Winnie Ruth Judd wrote to H.G. Richardson's wife, Fern, in 1952, demanding that she return that letter. And the reason that she wanted that letter back so desperately was because she was trying to get a new sanity hearing in 1953, and she wanted to make sure that any incriminating evidence out there would not prevent her from either getting this hearing or being deemed sane. And there's enough craziness in this letter that she certainly had something to worry about. Also, she admits to a crime in it. For my money, those letters demanding that Mrs. Richardson return the original letter tells me everything I need to know about how concerned she was and about its provenance, its importance to the case.
What does this mean for this history we've all taken as fact about Winnie Ruth Judd?
I think it's important because there are so many written histories about her that take up her self-defense plea. What really surprised me while I was researching this letter for several months was the number of people, librarians, historians, lay people who thought they knew the story, who said to me, please don't report this story the way that it's been told in the past. So people apparently were on to her long before I stumbled across this letter and decided that maybe I should research it. I didn't want her to be guilty. I didn't have any idea that she should have been found, that her story should be different than it is. She was found guilty for killing Anne Leroy in bed, and that's what she confesses to, not only in this letter, but in her earliest testimony in 1931, in versions that she told in private to her legal counsel. It matches a version that her husband told the pardon board. Her husband finked on her. It's the same version that she forbade 3 of her attorneys to tell in court. It's quoted by the prosecuting attorney in her criminal trial from a secret session that she held at the state pen. It matches up 3 or 4 different times where she told the same story. There's a 1933 jailhouse interview with Sheriff James McFadden where she tells this exact story to the sheriff while she's in prison. This is the version of the story that she told at Jack Halloran's indictment hearing. This version of the story matches the Los Angeles Examiner version that was published in late 1931, dictated by her husband and signed by Ruth Judd. So, there's a lot of evidence out there that, in fact, while she didn't necessarily want to be convicted of the true story, that she had been telling it, at least privately and to her legal counsel, repeatedly for a couple of years. Someone finally told her, hey, you need to stop telling that story.